Now is the perfect time to be buying rookie picks in your dynasty leagues. And so today we're going to be giving you each and every player that we would be selling away to go get one of these rookie picks. And when we started off with the 101, we talked through these players that we would be trying to trade away. We're talking about CJ Stroud, Saquon Barkley, Devon Achane, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Addison, what do you think about selling these players away for the 101?
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at trying to buy the 1.01, in most of your leagues, the person who got that 101 has probably deservedly earned that 1.01. So they're a pretty bad team. So you're going to have to throw them a pretty solid offer and probably a player that is going to help them build for more of the future rather than, I mean, Ashton Jeanty is phenomenal. That's why you would like to buy him to, buy the 101 to draft Ashton Jeanty. But for a rebuilding team, that running back may not necessarily be the best use case for their specific team. So you're going to want to have to come in with a strong offer, with a player that has more longevity or has the opportunity to gain a lot of value. And I think that's where most of these, I would say at least half of these guys in CJ Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. specifically come into play. When you have CJ Stroud, the other team might see it as kind of like a buy low on a quarterback that could reascend back up, rankings with, Nico Collins there. Now they just added Christian Kirk. Tank Dell might come back healthy. They can fix maybe that offensive line. But a young quarterback that maybe you necessarily don't need the production from, but you can, replace that production kind of with Ashton Jeanty at the running back position. Same kind of with Marvin Harrison Jr., down rookie season. They might see it as a kind of a buy low on the consensus 101 in last year's class. And, they can increase their odds of building for the future with a young second-year wide receiver. But you might not necessarily view the production of Marvin Harrison Jr. As something that is really important to your team if he's not going to hit in year two. And Ashton Jeanty is probably going to be a better production player for you if you're looking to buy the 101 to compete. Barkley and Achane, they're just everybody's taking Ashton Jeanty at the running back position, probably over Barkley and Achane. You're probably going to have to add something to each one of them. Maybe it's a late second or another player kind of in that range to help them say yes to that. But it's another one of those things where, if they are still looking at the running back position, maybe they'd be willing to, take Saquon Barkley or take Achane if they get something else on top, get a little bit of that known production in there and another opportunity to gain production or value with an additional asset.
So I have been, participating now on the DLF channel, making content with you for a few weeks now. And in the comments, I already hear someone in the comments saying, Addison, how did we come to these values on these players that we would trade away? So we'd like to let the good people know how we came up with these values.
Yeah. So a lot of this is coming from keep trade cut values. You can basically, they don't have like the picks specifically, but they do have the rookie players. So, for the 1.01, we just look to see where's Ashton Jeanty being valued on KTC, and he's in and around these kinds of players. We also use it's dynastylabs.com. They have a really cool like graphic chart on how startup ADP looks right now. A little bit of DLF ADP in there too. So it's kind of like a mixed bag of a bunch of different sites and values that these players, maybe in your league, you can't buy the 1.01 for Marvin Harrison Jr., but in another league, you might be able to. It's all about how your specific league values them, but we're trying to gauge that using KTC, Dynasty Labs, DLF ADP, all of those kind of values.
Perfect. And let's talk through the 102 to the 104. So if you miss out and you can't get to a Jeanty level asset and you have to kind of go for one of these other picks, here are the players that we think you should trade for those picks. So with quarterback, we got Jared Goff, we got Brock Purdy. At running back, we got Breece Hall, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams. At wide receiver, we have Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, T. Higgins. And then we threw in Sam Laporta. I know there's a lot of different opinions on Sam Laporta in the dynasty space right now. If you were trying to get to one of these early picks but couldn't get up all the way to the 101, these would be the players we're targeting. Addison, what do you think about some of these guys in this range with trading for younger assets?
Yeah, it's a very similar situation to the 1.01. And most of these teams in your leagues that have the early first probably aren't good teams unless somebody traded for that first, a year or two ago and just kind of lucked into it as a contending team. But you're still going to have to make, that really solid offer of a kind of young asset who maybe is a buy low coming off of lower production, or maybe in certain instances, if that team was kind of really injury prone, maybe they're looking to compete in 2025. And that's where you can sneak away, buying an early first for AJ Brown to kind of get off the age, for Breece Hall or Jonathan Taylor or Kyron Williams, that they want a running back. You can get off of the age of those running backs and, go for an Amari and Hampton in this range, a Tet McMillan in this range. I think it's just a really good way to get a really strong rookie asset and player in this class for other players that are, obviously going to be older. Maybe their production isn't going to stay or isn't going to come back necessarily. And you can start maybe shedding some of your age to start not necessarily rebuilding, but reloading. Or also just, if you can get a player that's going to produce similarly to an older asset, but they're younger, that player's value is going to rise drastically.
I wanted to add in the conversation around the quarterbacks. I think having a guys like Jared Goff and Brock Purdy, who honestly, Brock Purdy had a really good season this last year. Jared Goff had an amazing season. But if we're looking at them in the dynasty landscape, they're kind of viewed as high-end QB2s. And I think if you and I can probably both agree, this is one of the deepest years for quarterbacks and superflex startups in like recent memory. You could go all the way down to like a Dak Prescott is anywhere between QB 19 to like QB 20, where he was like QB 13 literally just last year. And that's due to all the influx of quarterbacks that we got the last 2 years in the class with CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. Can't really throw Anthony Richardson's name in there. But then, of course, last year with Caleb Williams, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix. So I think being able to trade one of those guys to get a shot if you need a quarterback like a Cam Ward, where I'm not saying that Cam Ward probably coming in dynasty value is going to be somewhere around QB 19 to QB 21. But if he hits, if he goes to the Titans and absolutely lights the world on fire, we're going to see Cam Ward slide into at least QB 12 to QB 11 range, if not even be able to go higher depending on that performance. Now, we both don't get paid the big bucks to evaluate quarterbacks. We don't get paid millions of dollars to make those type of decisions. But I do think if you are trying to get your team a little bit younger, making a bet on one of those, like making the bet to go for a guy like Cam Ward between the 102 to 104, if he's on the table, something I would really like to do on my Dynasty Fans football teams.
Yeah, I think that is phenomenal insight just because, Goff and Purdy, they're both, Goff is kind of at this age right now, and he has been for a couple of years, basically since joining the Lions, where he's outperforming his ADP every single year. Like he is just that guy that you can go get at QB2 prices who's going to outperform that and be more of a back end to even mid QB1 just because of the offense that he's been in with the weapons that he has. And that's really not changing outside. Like Ben Johnson has left, but he still has Amon-Ra, still has Jameson, still has Laporta, still has Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield. It's still pretty going to be like a similar offense. And I'm sure they don't really want to change the system all too much. But at this point in his career, like what more can Jared Goff do to actually start gaining value than what he has been doing over the past couple of years? Brock Purdy is kind of in a similar situation. Yes, he's younger, but the Niners have been basically tearing everything down offensively. They get rid of Deebo Samuel. They're coming in with injured Brandon Ayuk and injured Christian McCaffrey. Kittle's still there. Pearsall and Juwan Jennings are there, but it doesn't feel as good for Brock Purdy as maybe it did a year or two ago. And he seems like a player that might just kind of get stuck in this, QB 12 to 17 range. Whereas if Cam Ward comes in, like you said, if he comes in and just looks even moderately okay, like we're going to be talking about him as a player that could climb up into being the top, 8-6 quarterbacks, like we're already talking about with Bo Nix and Drake May and Caleb Williams. And it's not necessarily so much that Ward is as good of a prospect as some of those guys were, but it's just the age, it's the upside, it's the type of player that Cam Ward can be in a situation that he might find himself in, maybe throwing to Malik Neighbors. Maybe he's throwing to, Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku in a Kevin, Stefanski system. Like those are situations that Cam Ward can find himself in, that it might just be better to take the shot on him as opposed to some of these guys who, the production is there, but the value isn't going to be able to rise at any time soon.
So I know you and Justin did a video talking through some of the free agent moves, and you kind of already talked through Garrett Wilson and that overall value with adding Justin Fields. But I did want to add in the caveat. Let's say that you were at the 104 or the pick 104 or something that you're trying to go after, but you need wide receivers. You got a super strong quarterback room, but Tet McMillan, Amari and Hampton, and Ashton Jeanty are the first 3 picks off the board or projected to be off the board in your Superflex rookie drafts. Are you still comfortable trading away a guy like a Garrett Wilson for a Cam Ward?
Probably not, especially like if you said, like, if you already have good quarterbacks, and you are maybe trying to say, hey, I just want to hit the reset button on wide receiver, go get Tet McMillan. If Tet's not projected to be there at the 1.04, like we're this is a range of picks, and we're saying Garrett Wilson is in this range that we'd be willing to sell him for. But I still feel like, yeah, that's kind of like the league specific or situation specific scenarios where you might just have to be able to say, well, I don't need Cam Ward, so I'm not going to trade Garrett Wilson for, the 1.04 because Cam Ward's going to be there and Tet McMillan or Hampton aren't going to be there. So I would trade Garrett Wilson right now for Tet or for Omari and Hampton. I'm fine with both of those moves. If you still prefer Garrett Wilson over Tet, totally don't disagree with that. But maybe you do want to hit the reset button. Garrett versus Cam Ward, that's where, it does feel very team dependent on that one.
Moving on to the 105 to the 109, these are the players that we would trade away for these picks. We're starting it off at QB. We got Bryce Young. We got Tua Tagovailoa. At running backs, we're talking guys like James Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry. Wide receivers, Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers, Terry McLaurin, Jordan Addison, Jamison Williams, DK Metcalf, Chris Olave, and at tight end, TJ Hockenson. And I want to start it off talking about tight end because in this range, you're talking about guys like a Tyler Warren. You're talking guys like a Colson Loveland that you could flip for a younger tight end asset, even though TJ Hockenson, he's been up there in the Dynasty tight end landscape for a long time. But Addison, I want to talk about that because we also had Sam Laporta in our last pick range. So I kind of wanted you to talk about why trading away some of these tight ends for the picks might be the move.
Yeah, this is kind of the nuances of the tight end position compared to these pick ranges that we've kind of chosen based on some of the rookie tiers that we're already kind of starting to see. I personally don't know if you could trade TJ Hockenson for a pick in this range. Just like I don't know if you could trade Sam Laporta for a top 4 rookie pick right now, but I would do it. Like if you have Sam Laporta, I would be trying to make that move. Even if you, like I said, with, Achane and Saquon, maybe you have to add something to them to go get Jeanty. Maybe you just got to add something a little extra to Laporta to go get a top 4 pick or Hockenson to get a first in here. Because like when you start dropping down the tiers a little bit more, the next grouping obviously is the rest of the first to the late first, 110 to 112. I would keep TJ Hockenson for those picks. I would not trade Hawk for those picks, but I would trade Hawk for one of these, mid first if you get an opportunity to go get one of the running backs in Travion or Judkins or Caleb Johnson, or Ibuka finds himself most often in this range. Luther Burden finds himself in this range. I'm very comfortable trading away off of tight ends to go get some of those players that can also be difference makers at their positions, rather than, with Hockenson specifically, year 2 off the ACL, but, that offense is still very busy with Jefferson and Jordan Addison. You have the what if of JJ McCarthy coming off of injury, the possibility still that they're talking about Aaron Rodgers might sign with them because of McCarthy's not so ahead of scheduledness on the injury, I think is the reasoning for that. So it's just there's a lot of moving parts in Minnesota. So that's why I included Hockenson in here to sell him for this value range for one of those rookie running backs or one of those other 2 top rookie wide receivers.
And I know we added in some of these running backs, specifically like older age veterans, like a Christian McCaffrey and a Derrick Henry. And I know for most of us that are tuning in, watching Dynasty fantasy football content in March, we hate ageism in running backs. Anytime a running back gets over the age of 26, get him off my roster. I need to go find and replace him with someone younger. But I think when we're telling you to go trade these guys specifically, a lot of people are going to say, hey, I can't get the 107 for Derrick Henry. I can't get the 108 for Christian McCaffrey. What a lot of people sometimes forget is those teams were teams that were in the playoffs, that were on the fringe of making it to the next round. And sometimes they just need another piece. They think that, oh my gosh, if I can get prime Christian McCaffrey from 3 years ago, 2 years ago, that's going to be the next thing that takes me overall and helps me over that hump to get to a chip, which in essence, it can for sure. But I think if you're being a smart dynasty manager, sometimes getting out a year early is better than getting out a year late. And both of these guys, even though CMC this last season wasn't what we wanted, we still have a sell window that is 100% there for us. And Derrick Henry gave us another one, even though we think his wheels are going to fall off at some point. They just continue churning the little engine that could. I guess he's a big engine that could. But those are some of my thoughts when it comes to the running back landscape here that we're saying that you should sell for the picks. Addison, what are your thoughts?
No, yeah. And I think, when you look at these running backs specifically, these are, I would say, like the last on the list of guys that you feel really confident are going to like survive this year's draft class. Like when you get to all the other running backs after these guys, like your Brian Robinsons and your Tyrone Tracy's and your Isaiah Pacheco's, like those guys I don't think are moving the needle for a fringe playoff team or first round booted playoff team in terms of like instilling confidence in them that is the one piece that they need for 2025 to take their team over the top. These guys, though, James Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, maybe you can throw Josh Jacobs in there. Maybe it's Kenneth Walker. Those guys still feel like they are starting running backs in the NFL, and the NFL draft is not going to absolutely demolish any value that these guys have. And not to say that their teams won't draft a running back, but it just feels like those teams are confident in the players that they have for now, that maybe it's nice to be able to trade off of them for the age of McCaffrey or Derrick Henry, or maybe some of the production-ish things that come with James Cook or Kenneth Walker, guys like that, to just maybe hit reset on running back or grab one of those wide receivers. And speaking of wide receiver, Caleb, I wanted to throw this to you. We have a massive amount of wide receivers in this range right now. It's like basically all of these guys are like wide receiver 18 to 26, it seems like, in Dynasty rankings as like solid wide receiver twos for your teams. But I threw them in here because they really don't feel like guys that are true difference makers at the position. And they feel like the wide receiver equivalent of what I was talking about with Jared Goff and Brock Purdy, where there's not really much more they can do to like start just absolutely gaining value, because these guys just kind of feel like they are what they are right now. Is that kind of how you feel? Like, you're comfortable trading these guys for rookies in this class?
Easily. And I think the dynasty landscape as a whole has changed. I mean, if we talked about it 2 years ago, we're talking a guy like a Zay Flowers coming out, like being a young wide receiver just had its intrinsic value attached to it. And if you showed any signs of life, boom, you were shooting up the dynasty rankings. Now, as we're starting to realize, hey, running backs do matter. It doesn't really matter the age, but as long as they're producing fantasy football points on my team, boom, I need those hero RBs, those guys that can be superstars and produce points. Kind of the shift from the middling wide receiver to the young wide receiver to that kind of does that year after year, his value has started to go down. And so as we're talking about guys in that range, I mean, that pretty much is Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave as a whole. When we're talking about him, of course, we've seen shades of DK Metcalf. Terry McLaurin had a great year this last year, but was also getting up there in age. So I feel very confident if I'm trying to trade away one of these veterans to go take a shot on a younger running back that's coming out in the super strong running back class. I mean, I'm not saying that if you trade away Zay Flowers and go get a guy like an Emeka Ibuka, that's 100% going to be a 1-for-1 that you're going to win that deal. But I think when we're looking at this class and the strength of the running backs, I think being able to trade any of those wide receivers for a shot at one of those guys in this range, that's kind of would be ideally what I would do, because there's the upside on the running back side. And definitely with team build, you can go find another wide receiver too that's a little bit cheaper if you need that wide receiver production.
That last part I think is super important, because like if you sell away a Zay Flowers or a Devonta Smith, people are going to be like, well, now I have a whole wide receiver. Well, you can just go buy Jacoby Myers or buy Christian Kirk, or, there's a multitude of guys that you can find at the wide receiver position, because this is where the wide receivers really start to flatten out production wise. That, the 1 or 2 point per game difference between Devonta Smith and Christian Kirk or whoever it might be that you can get for cheaper really doesn't matter all that much to your starting lineup. But if you can find those players, especially at the running back position, like you said, or, just hit on, maybe Luther Burden does absolutely explode and you did 1-for-1 win that trade. Those are the opportunities and parts of the unknown to this equation that we know, like we said, what Devonta Smith is right now. We know what Zay Flowers is. We know what Chris Olave is, basically. We don't really know what Luther Burden is. We don't really know what Emeka Ibuka is. He could be the next Amon-Ra St. Brown that everybody wants him to be and are confident to be. These running backs, they could be the next great running backs at the position. That's what we're trying to do in Dynasty by trying to hit reset, but still feeling comfortable with the floor that we're getting from the rookie, while also recognizing that we could piece together some of our depth back with cheaper assets in the second or third round of rookie drafts or with veterans from those picks.
Now moving on to players that we would sell to go get the 110 to 112. Starting off at quarterback, we got Sam Darnold, Justin Fields. Running backs, we got Joe Mixon, Tyrone Tracy, basically anyone else that you could sell that someone likes for one of those 110 to 112 picks. When we move on to wide receivers, Mike Evans, Khalil Shakir, Jaden Reed, Ricky Pearsall, Brandon Ayuk, Chris Godwin, Tyreek Hill, and then at tight end, Dalton Kincaid, which I feel like there's still some Dalton Kincaid truthers out there. So if you can find that guy that has the 110 to 112, boom, send that bad boy away. I'm 100% there with you, Addison. But when we look at guys, this is an interesting range. We got some quarterbacks that we got new situations for both these guys. We don't know what that's going to look like from a fantasy production standpoint, but I know a lot of people are excited because they did get those contracts, even if Justin Fields was more of a bridge level contract that he just got. We look at the running backs. Joe Mixon is coming off and continues to get older, but continues to produce really great fantasy football value. Tyrone Tracy, this is interesting. I've seen people say, hey, I would trade the 206 for Tyrone Tracy. I've seen people say I would trade a late first for Tyrone Tracy. Then there's people that, don't want to trade for Tyrone Tracy at all. I'm probably in that camp. I'm not going to give up a late first to go get Tyrone Tracy, but that's not the point of this video. If I had Tyrone Tracy and I could get the 110 to 112, boom, bada boom, you better believe I'm going to do that. But I wanted to talk to you, Addison, about these wide receivers, because if you're at the 110 to 112 range, that probably means you were one of the top 3 teams in the league. You made it all the way, you either won the chip or you didn't. And a guy like a Mike Evans is going to be super beneficial to you as a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 who can give you wide receiver 1 numbers. A guy like a Tyreek Hill, even if he's getting up there in age, same thing. We're expecting a bounce back this year. What are your thoughts on this range of wide receivers, and what's the advantage to selling them at this time to go get one of these 110 to 112 picks?
Well, I think you hit it right there that, when we're thinking about the teams that own these picks, they either won the league or they lost in the championship or they won the semifinals. That's essentially 110 to 112 right there. So they're, like you said, a top 3 team. If you can take advantage of that, and because they're going to be looking at this rookie class and they're going to be thinking, oh man, I'm not getting any of these running backs. I'm not getting any of these quarterbacks. At best, maybe I could get, the RB6 in this class. Maybe I get Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland. But what is that really going to do for me? But and if you can just dangle a very win now piece right in front of them and say, hey, look at your squad right now that just came off of winning a championship or almost won a championship. I could give you Mike Evans right now for your first round pick. That's a major production win. Tyreek Hill for this pick. Chris Godwin for this pick right now. Look at what Godwin was doing before he got hurt last year. Same with kind of the running backs even too. Mixon, you could throw Najee Harris in there. Like he just signed with the Chargers. He might be a top 15 running back in LA. Look at what J.K. Dobbins was doing. Najee's better than J.K. Those are the arguments that you need to be making if you're trying to build or trying to trade for these picks, is because those teams probably don't necessarily care about their first round pick so much because they're still looking to maintain their competitive roster window. And more often than not, they're going to be looking at these very good veterans that might be a little bit older, but are just still so productive. And for you, you're getting, a shot on all of these rookies. Like I said, like maybe somebody sneaks in here like a Travis Hunter or a Shedeur Sanders, or you get one of those, rookie tight ends. Maybe it's another running back that is not one of the top 5 guys right now, but they found a really good landing spot. There is still opportunity in this range. Like in here last year, this is where Bo Nix was last year. This is where Ladd McConkey was. Trey Benson might have been in this range, and that's not necessarily like a fantastic pick right now, but there's still value to be had for a lot of these guys that you get a lot younger. You're getting value upside from them if they do pan out and are way ahead of expectations, that you're just moving away from old guys that, they're literally half a season away from being Cooper Kupp, essentially with these older guys. And
I think the other point that we can even add is if we can get into, as much as you might not like the 2025 class, or you think it's weak, or you don't like late 2025 picks, we all know that you get into one of these picks, even if it's the 110, 111, 112, that bad boy is a liquid asset. And as we approach the draft, as we approach your dynasty rookie drafts, those values are only going to be going up. Now, how much more up? That's the question of landing spots and kind of how the community feels about it as a whole. but they will go up in value. And so being able to trade one of these aging veterans to go get one of these picks right now, even if you don't have a specific name attached to that pick, is 100% something that I'm totally on board with you, Addison, doing with all these guys.
It might also be easier come actual draft day. If you trade, Mike Evans for the 111, it might be easier for you to then trade up from the 111 on draft day. It's probably, instead of offering somebody, the Mike Evans and, the 2.08 for the 107, that might look better if it's the 111 and the 2.08, because they're getting a gauge of how that draft is already moving. If they're already on the clock, it might just be better to springboard yourself up even further with that late first than it is with, a Mike Evans or a Tyreek Hill, because not every team is going to want those specific players. But I bet you most every team is probably still going to want that 111, especially if they are just trading back a few picks. They might see some value ranges or tiers being a lot flatter than you do. So it's probably easier for you to make additional moves after the fact by just selling any of these players for this late first, than doing something with it later on.
If you like Dynasty Fantasy Football, hit that subscribe button. We are on the way to 20,000 subscribers. Hit a like button for us as well. And if you would like to see more content, Addison just put out a tight end marker update. Go check that out right here.